Welcome to episode 171 of the Necronama.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, and this movie made me really glad that no one ever calls me.
I'm Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of the podcast you're listening to, and I'll be honest, the way I use my phone right now, I probably would have done it the same way as was done in this movie, which was, I'm not going to answer. I'm going to wait for you to text.
Can you imagine? See, that's why they had to set it in the 70s. If it was set now, Finney would just ignore everyone. He'd be like Snapchatting around the room and like filtering things. And...
It's like, sir, do you have a PlayStation 5? This place is awesome. My dad's a drunk and my mom is dead and my sister's really fucking annoying. I'll just stay
none of
here.
That happened in the book. But...
Could you imagine he stays there and then like it turns into that joke that your parents would always say about if somebody kidnapped you, they give you back in 5 minutes. Just having Finney sit there just getting on getting on Max's nerves, basically saying like you're not like any of the other kids. Like they cried and they screamed and that I killed them, and here you are sitting here eating up all my food. Like, you're not really pissing me off. You're just annoying.
Wait, isn't Max the brother?
I'm sorry, not Max. Well, Max was too busy doing his cocaine. So the grabber, Daddy Hawk. Which
Max should have been like high enough that the axe didn't even phase him. He was just like, no way, man.
Yeah, walking around with it still sticking out of his head. Hey,
this
bro,
episode has already gone off the rails.
It's going to go off the rails, and then Max will snort them.
Sweet.
Cocaine jokes on a podcast.
There you go. I think there's a lot of cocaine going on here.
Oh, well, it was the 80s, so.
Well, I mean, just these masks alone. This guy, I don't know. I'd like to know where he got them, like as a character. Like, as a character, these don't look like masks he made. They look like something he found somewhere. They're basically the comedy and tragedy masks, but then like devilized, but then they have like these weird things where you can like take it apart and switch out pieces and all this crazy shit. But none of it looks like it's like something he recently bought. I want to know the backstory of these masks, which you cannot find in the short story, just so you know.
Here's the backstory that I have in my head.
In the short story.
This is the backstory I have in my head as far as the character. Now, if the producers and writers listen to this and I'm right, just let me know. I don't care any way other than that. I believe that since he had his little magic truck van, the creeper van, that he bought them someplace like a magic store or theater store or costume store or whatever, and then had somebody modify them or bought them from, an old theater company that had gone out of business or at least had gone under, because that's definitely something that involved a lot of craftsmanship and a lot of time and a lot of effort, as well as a lot of training to make something like that, because this was used as an opera all over it. And, maybe he bought them at an auction, a estate sale or something like that. After he, according to the book, after he went on a serious fitness and diet regimen to completely change his appearance.
Absolutely. He's no longer an extremely overweight, bald man named Al.
Well, you can call him Al. Before we get too deep in this, I got to say this because it's going to piss me off. We get the entire show through this without me saying it. So I'm going to rewind myself a little bit and just redo my thing, which is, I'm Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of the podcast you're listening to, and extremely pissed off at all the people that run around recently that are in love with serial killers. For those of you who did not grow up in the 80s or the 90s, mind you, this is relevant to the film that we're talking about.
Absolutely.
those of you who grew up in didn't grow up in the 80s and 90s don't understand how fucked up the serial killers or even the child abduction situations were. And on top of that, you have people, families, communities that were excessively traumatized by stuff like this, whether we're talking about the Atlanta child murders, whether we're talking about John Wayne Gacy, Richard Ramirez, the Hillside Strangler, Ted Bundy, or yes, everybody's flavor of the week right now, Jeffrey Dahmer, where untold numbers of pieces of shit online are sympathetic to a person that killed and ate people, specifically killed and ate marginalized queer men and boys, like children, not like 19, I'm talking about 13, 14 years old. But for some reason, I don't know what the fuck it is. I watched I almost said Hulu. I watched the Netflix series for two reasons. One, when I was at Arizona State, I taught a course that was film is history, history is film. So whenever there's a biopic that comes out or a series, I'll catch it and I immediately do the whole, how are they going to frame this? How are they going to tell the story? What are they going to do? So I'm ruining the entire series for my wife because she didn't know much about it, because she didn't grow up in the United States. So Jeffrey Dahmer wasn't a big thing where she grew up. So I'm explaining to her that, and again, I'm ruining shit for her as I'm watching, because I'm like, oh, this is the guy who got away. And she's like, how do you know that? Because he's got handcuffs on. I remember the news story when it broke. That's how they caught him, was, one of the people that he had killed, or at least one of the people he was going to kill, had escaped and had handcuffs on, and the police made fun of him for having, thinking that this was like two gay lovers having a fight initially. And, again, the part where the boy is getting away, I'm like, oh, this must be the kid that the cops, the stupid cops, gave back to Jeffrey Dahmer. And she's like, how do you know that? I was like, I was a teenager when this shit happened. So I knew all about it. I think I was 14 years old when he got caught. But I remember, again, that was one of those things that came out I shouldn't even say trial, but that came out in the news reports. Now, I'm saying all this because people are very quick, and I would even say it's limited to a certain demographic. But I would say that people that are disassociated from those situations are so quick to sympathize with someone who has been charged with a crime that's very heinous, or they've been convicted of it, or even the suspects, that guy who killed his wife and daughters a couple of years ago. There are women who are writing him. There are guys writing to Jodi Arias still in prison. And maybe those people need to be locked up. I'm not for the carceral state, but maybe those people need to be locked up as well, because that's how we end up with news reports or, true crime movies and whatever that give us a sympathetic look at somebody who is a fucking monster. And speaking of monsters, it's kind of the same thing that's been going on with George W. Bush over the last few years, where people have been forgetting. Yeah, the painter.
Okay.
Where people have forgotten shit that he did. And my fear is within the next couple of years, and I'll just say after the next presidential election, there'll be a certain orange person. And the reason why I'm talking about this, they're all sociopaths. There will be a certain orange person that people will look at back and say, like, oh, look, it'll be the whole Biff Tannen at the casino type documentary about Trump, talking about how he rose to fame and wealth and how he struggled so hard.
That's some crazy irony.
Yeah. So,
going from Trump to Biff to Trump. That's crazy. No,
so what I'm trying to say,
literally, Biff is very based on Trump. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things I wholeheartedly see happening, because you will have, and since we're talking about Jeffrey Dahmer and we're talking about those other kids, because I find this to be interesting as well. Not that they're the only ones. But when you're talking about marginalized victims, a lot of times those victims do not get the sympathy or the empathy from the same people that are now feeling sorry for Ted Bundy or think that Jeffrey Dahmer's sexy or whatever based off of what they saw in a movie or a TV series. So all I'm trying to say to you assholes out there, if you're still here, just don't even bother listening to our show. Download it. I mean, you don't have to listen to it, but download it. But understand, you need to talk to somebody about this idea of, I think, you can say Evan Peters is sexy. I'm going to say Ethan Hawke is sexy in this movie. But to equate that with Jeffrey Dahmer is worth the D, I can't fly with that one because one, you're reprocessing a lot of trauma for people that went through that, and then they now understand if something similar to that happened now, which has already happened, you will have people that are running around and advocating for someone who did such heinous shit and admitted to doing such heinous. It's a completely different thing if he was being charged and there was evidence to support him and evidence to support his conviction. And, you can leave it up in the air as far as like whether or not it had been done. But when somebody is caught doing this and they've got all the evidence and then they admit to it, the sympathy ends there.
Admit to it, like glorify in talking about what they did.
Yeah.
Like it's even further than just admitting it. Like he was like happy to spell it out for everybody.
I think, and I might be remember the wrong serial killer, but I think at one point he's like, I'm surprised I got away with it this long. Not, I'm sorry to everybody I did this to, but I'm surprised I got away with it this long.
Just like, wow, you guys really suck, don't you?
But I will say this, and I'm going to make the same critique in this movie. It definitely shows how police sometimes cannot get out of their own way to help people. And screw up so badly. Not always, not necessarily intentionally, but as far as in this movie, going to a little child in school without her parents and submitting her to questioning, like, tell us about your dreams. You told Sally Sue that you were dreaming this, but God damn it, how do you know? Is there a leak in the department? I'm like, hold the fuck on. This is a child. Like, even the principal should have been like, this is a child. I'm going to call her father to come here. But it's kind of like, oh, God damn it. You're going to tell us because we're the police. We're trying to find kids. Well, you're doing a pretty bad job at it.
I will say, though, at least this shows a time when the police tried to solve cases. So there's that.
You're going to get me going. All right, well, let's go ahead and get this started. We don't have a guest, it's you and me, so this really came down to us trying to figure out what was going on. And I sat there and I'm like, I want to say Black Phone, but I don't know if James watched it or if he'd even like it. I liked it. There were some people who didn't for whatever reasons, but I don't really trust their judgment with movies. And so I was like, James, Black Phone. And the response was, fuck yeah. And I immediately thought, this is awesome. I'm going to have a reason to rewatch it. And then also do the whole thing of you liked, you love Joe Hill. I mean, it's no secret.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Hill is one of my favorite authors ever. I've often argued that he's the best thing Stephen King ever made, even if I say it tongue in cheek just to piss people off. But
even if those people walk out of your panel.
That's the best part of my day. I love when people get mad at that and leave my panel. It's hilarious to me. 2 people did it in Salt Lake. It was great.
I would have been laughing along with however much alcohol they would have allowed me to take into that room, which probably would have been none. So here, I'm going to start this off since this is us. I'm going to start up with this question, which is, this is one of your favorite short stories. And, I found that out from our conversation. This is one of your favorite short stories. Now, when it comes to adaptations, things can be hit or miss. And spoiler alert, you've already said that you like this one, at least to me and maybe earlier in the show. But what did you think about this movie, or what did you think about the adaptation as far as what worked, what didn't work for you?
All right, so this is hard for me. So I need to back up. My parents tell me I was almost kidnapped as a child. And And so it's been this ongoing thing in my life that I'm terrified of. Not so much anymore. I'm very fat so that people can't pick me up easily. And basically I was at a like town fair and I spent a lot of time with this clown because I find clowns fascinating even now. And apparently like I was helping him like pack up his stuff. I was probably like 8 or 9. So I shouldn't have been helping him pack up his stuff. It's weird, right? And I don't know. My dad showed up like just in time and got me. And like, I guess the clown guy was like kind of angry about it. And my parents are absolutely convinced that he was trying to kidnap me because he had like sectioned me off from people and stuff. Right. And I don't know. Maybe he was just a weird clown guy who thought, hey, 8-year-olds should help me pack my stuff because they enjoyed the show. I don't know. But so this has been this ongoing narrative in my life where my mom and dad were convinced that I was almost kidnapped. And so as I got older and I began to understand what that actually meant, it became not necessarily a fear of mine so much as something I think about a lot. Like, was he gonna, like, if it was gonna happen, I'm not saying it was, but like, was he gonna kill me? Was he gonna molest me? Was he like just trying to get a son and he was gonna brainwash me and make me think he was my dad? Like, there's all these possibilities. And so that's the stuff I think about more. So with that said, this short story hit me hard the first time I read it because he's not a part-time magician in the story. He's a part-time clown. And so, and on top of that, he doesn't just like grab Finney and pull him in, whose name isn't Finney, by the way. His name is John Finney, not Finney Blake. But anyway, he sprays him with wasp spray in the face, in his eyes. And that's how he gets him into the truck. And then Finney has to deal with this forever. Like he can't see the whole time he's there, basically. It's always like he's underwater and stuff. And he's in constant pain. And I think that's a really cool addition. I don't know that it would have worked in the film. I'm just saying I think it's neat. But so this became a story that really hit me hard, right? Because it was tied into this weird history that I may or may not have. And so this has always been like one of my like, I don't know, top 10 short stories, but solely because of how I'm married to it. If you actually reread the short story, and you know it pains me to say mean things about Joe Hill, so I'm not going to go too far, but it's not his best written story, and it's not even necessarily a great story. It's a good concept, and there's a lot of good stuff in it, but it's not like this film. Like, he only talks to like one dead kid, and like I said, the grabber is like overweight and bald, and like Finney, yeah, I'll call him Finney just for the sake of continuity here because that's his last name and his first name, so it works out. But so Finney is like, oh, I can get past him. He's fat, you know, like he can't move fast, and so that's like a major driving force that isn't in this, and so I got to a point when I reread it last night after watching the movie that I don't love it as much anymore because I really love what they did with the film, with two major exceptions, and we'll come back to that in a bit. But overall, this film is so well done that it literally kicked this story out of my top 10 because I will forever now look at it going, well, but they didn't do this and they didn't do that. But here's the thing, man, as a writer, and I'm sure you know this, like if you went back and you reread something you wrote forever ago or even a couple years ago, we become different people.
Right.
Like every time that I open my book Fat Camp, there's something else I would do today. There's some other way I would do things, some other way I would phrase things. Some other experience has changed me. So I look at this story and I don't know how much was Joe Hill changing it. I don't know how much of it was the writer and the director and the money people and whatever else. But there's a lot of changes to this and some are necessary, some are not. But I also look at it like, let's say it was 100% Joe Hill. He's not going to be the same person he was 15 years ago when he wrote this or however long. I don't know. Look it up and send me hate mail for not caring enough to look. But like, you're just not going to be the same writer. You're going to do it differently. Right. I have a script for Fat Camp that is extremely different from the book. And I hope one day it's made so that people go, well, I can't believe he made these changes from the book. You know, like that'll be great because I'd love to get paid for the movie. But so like, I don't know. I think we just get too hung up on these things. And I guess what I'm really trying to say is, yes, I loved the short story. Yes, I loved this film. Yes, they're connected, but I think they both bring very different things to the table.
Mm. And that's one of the great things. I was going to say that's one of the great things about it is that you get to see that adaptation, and Max Brooks had one of his book talk. This is back when Harlem Hellfighters had come out, so around like 2014, 2015, something like that. And he was talking about World War Z because the movie had just come out like a year or two before, and so people that were there that may have been buying his new book, I mean, because it was announced about his new book, were asking him a lot of questions about World War Z, as well as asking him about what's going to happen with Harlem Hellfighters in the future. And some of the questions were geared toward his writing and some of his choices and how that conflicted with the film, or at least the conflict that they saw between that and the film. And his response to how do you feel about the movie version of your book versus the book version? As far as like what do you see as far as they did right, did wrong? And he answered it, and I feel in a very truthful but safe way, which was, it's not mine anymore. Like once I sold them the rights to make the movie, that's their story. They asked me my opinion on things, but it's not my story. And he even said some of the stuff they did in the movie, he was like, I would have loved to have done that in the book. But then they even said there was some stuff that was in the book that would not have worked in a movie. So he's like, that's why they changed to, make it towards Brad Pitt and this whole idea of trying to find this cure and get back to his family, those conflicts. And he's like, that was the way that they felt to make it. And I think that's the issue that we all have with any of our written work. We have that moment to go back and look at things because the book is never done. The story is never done. There's always something that you're going to go back and see. And you said, oh, you can pick up your book yet. Like I picked up my books yesterday to do a live author reading on TikTok. And I'm looking at stuff. I'm like, no, it's not like because I looked at older versions of the books and I'm like, no, that's not the way I actually did it. And I've seen notes from stories and books that I've written, or I've at least gotten a handwritten manuscript of, or just have an outline. And I look at them like, wow, Magnolia Lane was actually supposed to be about a family moving into a house that was sat on a former plantation that their grandparents had left to them, or one of their grandparents had left to them. And there are people that live in the area that don't want them to have the land. But the twist is the neighbor they think is fucking with their house is actually there trying to help them. And, I'm sitting there like, wow, that's completely different than a bunch of assholes going on a tour and getting fucked up by a ghost.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it's even a problem that I have with people who complain about reboots and whatever. And we were talking about this before the show, which was, I made the joke about Blazing Saddles, how no matter what you create something great, for one generation within a genre. And you have people that will look back at that as the way it should always be done. It should never change. If you reshoot the movie, you should do a shot for shot remake of it. You shouldn't think of anything new. So people make the argument of, oh, Blazing Saddles, you'll never be able to make a movie like that today because people are too sensitive, talking about how things change over time. It's not that people are more sensitive. People are acknowledging what's problematic and addressing it. Now, you can still make whatever fucking jokes you want because there are going to be people who are going to buy that. But then there are also going to be companies that are not going to risk, I'm going to piss off X amount of people if I put this person in this movie playing whatever role. Or we're going to have a bad PR campaign because we did a reboot of Revenge of the Nerds and forgot about that one scene that was in it. And those of you who don't know, there's a rape scene in Revenge of the Nerds, even though it's not acknowledged by a lot of people as a rape scene. It's non-consensual sex that Louis Skolnick is having with the cheerleader from Adams University, because he takes her to a tent or wherever they have sex under the guise that he's somebody else because he's wearing a mask. She has sex with him, and it's okay within the world of film at that time because she enjoyed it. So it wasn't rape if she enjoyed it. And I say that because you have changing attitudes that take place over time, whereas you might have a film company that was okay with certain things, or a publishing company that was okay with certain actions, words, terms, the way certain things were addressed. And then when you try to make it in the 90s or in the 2020s, there's going to be a completely different environment because of the experiences that we've all kind of shared, but then also the experiences of people who are now going to be at the table. Whereas there are some really disturbing scenes in this movie, because you've told me and other people have told me this as well, which is write what you're scared of, right? Or people respond to what they're fearful of.
Yeah.
And there's this early on in the film, you know, after Bruce goes missing, or at least one of the first kids that on screen we see goes missing. It's that moment where the sister, Gwen, I was going to call her Wendy, where Gwen is getting the shit beaten out of her by her dad because some kids at school, she had a conversation about seeing what happened to him in her dream. And her dad is an alcoholic. He's also grieving because of his wife committing suicide. But that doesn't excuse what took place, because I look back on the 80s, and that's the one thing I don't see in Stranger Things that doesn't seem real. People were beating the shit out of their kids in the 80s.
Yep.
And it was seen as strange for you to be a parent that didn't hit your kids. So that whole scene, actually, both times I watched this movie, I turned my head away from the screen because I couldn't watch it. But what made it worse was I could still hear it, and I could imagine in my head, because I can't speak for you because I don't know what your experience was with your parents, but I got hit a lot when I was a kid with the traditional quote unquote spanking with a hand or a ruler or a yardstick, and I should have even said, like, the telephone part fucked me up too, because I got beaten with obviously this is me laughing at my own pain, but beaten with like extension cords and phone lines and God, there's all types of shit. Railroad tracks the model railroad tracks, not the full size.
I was gonna say, talk about going off the rails. My God.
Yeah, but no, I mean that's something in this movie that I just blew me away, that they included and made it so visceral.
I hate it. It's my number one complaint about this movie.
You mean it's because of the change, or because they included it?
Both.
Okay.
So number one, in the book, and this isn't just me going, the book is better. It's these are things I don't understand changing.
Mm-hmm.
So this is my biggest complaint. In the book, mom is alive, number one, and dad and mom have a fight. And she's like, I don't want to live here anymore. And he's like, so don't. And that's it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There's no abuse. There's no beating your kids. None of that shit. And I get it. I get that we can make their life shitty, right? But he could have just been an alcoholic. I don't know why we got rid of mom to begin with, but I have many questions about whether he killed her or not, because I've gone down this weird ass rabbit hole because this is included. But so this scene, for me, one strike would have been plenty to get the point across. Mm-hmm. Or just him lifting the belt, or even just Finney walking in and dad's holding the belt and the girl's crying. That's it. Right. That's all I need.
Right.
That gets the exact same point across. Instead, we get this incel fantasy of hurting women. Mm-hmm. And it pisses me off so fucking bad. He's not hitting Finney. We never see him hit Finney that way. We never see any of that shit. It's solely him hitting this little girl. And that bugs me so fucking much. And it's the number one reason that this won't be my favorite film of the year.
Okay.
But on top of that, like it really bothers me that later the grabber is holding a belt and the whole point is when you come up the stairs, you're going to get, why is he doing the exact same thing? Like if they were at least trying to like give us a red herring that maybe dad's really the grabber, that would have at least been somewhat interesting, I guess.
Okay.
But as it is, none of this makes sense to me and I fucking hate it.
Okay. Well, let me say this before I do forget. If you are in 2022, if you're still hitting your kids, you're a fucking monster. Because it doesn't teach your kids anything. And I'm speaking from experience. It doesn't teach us shit other than sneaker ways to get away with what we were going to do anyway. It's, oh, fuck, I got caught this time. So next time I'm going to make sure that I really cover my tracks. There are things. All it does is make your kids fearful of them as well. Because there are things to this day I will not have conversations with my parents about at all. One more than the other. But to this day, I will not have these serious, heartfelt conversations because we never had that moment. You know, we never had those moments where it's kind of like, oh, you know, this is what life is and whatever. It was simply, oh, you fucked up. Now I'm going to fuck you up. And again, if in 2022, I don't give a shit what your excuse is, you lost your temper, you slipped, anything like that, you still did it. And for someone to excuse it for religious purposes, double fuck you. Because it's still weird to go by rules written, 1,800 years ago, because those books were written well after the death of Jesus. And that's
God
not
of love wants you to hurt your children, Don.
I mean, this is not me like hating your religion or belief system or anything like that. My issue is when people push that as the doctrine of that's the way you should raise your kids, you should hit them. Like that's immediately a hard pass for me. Now the thing is, now I'm not saying I if I did indicate this, I want to make it clear. I'm not saying I like the scene. What I'm saying is it fucked me up.
Oh, yeah.
And for me, when we're talking about shit that scares you, and you and I joke about this, you know, one day we'll be able to hang out again in person and joke. But there are some things that you're talking with me about, and it's like you almost have the black sense, you know, the black spidey sense from talking to me and other people as far as like looking out for shit. And you become sometimes hypersensitive to it, where you will then come to me and say, Don, this doesn't worry you? You're not concerned? And I'm like, I got like, I'm still reading the room. Like something's not there, but you know, it's also not scaring the shit out of me. So
TSA, baby, TSA.
So when it comes to,
I just want to take a second and say that's the nicest thing you've ever said to me. I feel
you were
so
such
right
an
now.
asshole. I say nothing.
No, I'm
but
so
nice
serious. No, I'm so serious. That means so much. Thank you.
What the fuck did I do?
You accepted me. Thanks. Anyway, continue.
Look, there's a reason why people are like, oh, friends. I was like, no, that's my brother. Like, no, fuck you. He may be an idiot, but he's my idiot. No, I had to take that away from you before you used it.
No, I go back to, though, I just feel like it's so overdone. I just feel like they could have accomplished the same thing fast. But here's my other problem with it. At the end, I'm supposed to be happy that they're back with Dad.
That
I can
was
never
what
forgive
lost me.
Dad.
I'm like,
I can never forgive Dad. I can never be okay with them being there. I'm worried about Gwen the entire time because Finney isn't there to keep her safe.
Exactly.
This girl goes and hides at her friend's house every Friday, whether she realizes that's what she's doing or not.
Mm-hmm.
Like, everything about Dad is horrible because of how they wrote him. And I'm so angry about it because there's no fucking reason for it.
Well, and not only that. Okay, so you're talking about how Gwen has, you know, her friend Stacy or whoever she's going to hang out with, right?
Sure.
Finn makes it clear, it's like, I don't have any friends.
Stacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
He's like, I don't have any friends. So I could easily imagine him doing the same thing where it's like, I don't want to have to be quiet all the time because if I happen to make a noise, Dad's probably going to, lose it. And I'm glad they made that connection later on as far as like the quiet and understanding how to be quiet. Because that is definitely a learned skill.
Ooh, now, I like that. All right. You gave him a point. Good work.
Well, no, that's the only one. You could have had that.
That's good. I like that.
But again, the other stuff isn't necessary. You could easily show the dad getting pissed off about stuff like, oh, you kids are making too much noise. You don't need him to beat the shit out of Gwen. You don't need him to have any type of other confrontation with anybody. Like theoretically, you can kill off the dad as far as like, you don't see him anymore. So when it is the end and the police are coming up, it's Gwen and Finney reconnecting and hugging. I did not need the part where the dad's like, oh, Finney, oh, Gwen, you're both okay. I'm a shitty dad and I have no idea where either one of you have been, especially the daughter who's still in my house.
Dude,
but I'm really happy to see you.
While we're talking about the dad, I got to tell you, one of my favorite scenes rereading the short story. So at the beginning, Finney's drinking grape soda, watching the grabber, right? Like he doesn't know it's the grabber at the time. Obviously, he just sees this fat man carrying groceries and he's going to spill them all. And he's drinking this grape soda because it's his addiction. He has grape soda all the time. And there's this scene where Dad, I think it's actually in Finney's head. But anyway, Dad goes down and sees the empty grape soda bottle and sees the cops getting rid of it. And I'm like, that would have been amazing on screen. Going that route with Dad would have been so much better. Just if he was a dick all the time and then this made him go, fuck, I suck. That would have been so much more interesting to me.
Yeah. But
that scene where Dad's sleeping and Finney turns off the lights and stuff.
Right.
That was amazing tension in that scene. Because the whole time I'm just waiting for Dad to get up and lose his shit. How dare you turn off the TV? I was watching that,
Right.
So I'm torn. I would rather see the other aspect. Yeah.
I was waiting for a jump scare at that point. Mm-hmm. I was sitting there timing it. And again, both times I knew what was going to happen the second time. Yeah. But both times I had the same reaction, which was they found a good way to drive the fear of a child, because if I haven't shared this story before, I'm going to share it now. Don't worry, this is not painful trauma. This is more like, that's why you are the way you are, which could be the same thing. My mom was raised First Baptist, not Southern Baptist. Southern Baptist is a whole thing. But she was raised First Baptist. And she was one of those people who's raised in the church because they were a small town community in rural Virginia. So when it came time for church, she went Sunday. You might have gone Wednesday or Monday. You might have gone Wednesday, might have gone Saturday. So there were several days in a week when she was in church. She was in choir. She was Sunday school, all that stuff. And when my parents got married, or I should say when they met, got married and had me, they had a mixed religious situation. So my dad raised Roman Catholic, still Roman Catholic, which is another story. And then my mom is non-denominational. She's Christian, but she doesn't give a shit about what church she's going to if she goes to church. But when they were together, my mom was still heavily First Baptist. So after they got divorced, because I hated going to church, even when it was Catholic church, but with Catholic church, the issue was it was a bargain. I've only got to go for 35 minutes and it's going to be over. If I went to church with my mom, it was guaranteed 2 hours. Guaranteed 2 hours of, I don't know how you make the same 2-hour movie every Sunday. Nothing against anybody, but I went to those churches, and especially during the summer, 2 hours was a good day because we were sometimes in there 3 and almost 4 hours. And yeah, if you slept, you got a little something. But anyway, my mom after my parents got divorced, it was kind of like, oh, I don't want to raise you in a broken home, and I want to make sure that you two understand God. So we're going to have Bible study in the house. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, I'm a fucking science nerd, Mom. This is not going to work. So she's like, we're going to have Bible study, and then we're going to go to church on Sundays and blah, blah, blah. My mom got out of the military and then got, hourly jobs here and there. So she was working in a grocery store at one point. She was working at the post office for a period of time. And my mom was working like all the time. So when I was in middle school and high school, before I left for college, if it was a Saturday night, I pretty much knew if we were going to go to church the next day. So I didn't press my luck. And this is where I'm auditioning for a Black reboot of this. Where you just see the same kid every Sunday morning, like walking through the house with socks on, climbing the railing as opposed to stepping on the steps because you don't want them to squeak. So like every Sunday morning, I timed it out to where I knew what would work with my mom if she woke up and then decided, oh, we're going to go to church. Church like started at 10. I knew if we made it to like 9:15 without her waking up or getting woken up, we weren't going to church, because she would immediately see the time and be like, oh, it's too late for us to get ready and maybe we'll go next week. So there was a period of like a month and a half where we didn't go to church because my mom did not get up in the morning. I don't know if she like set the alarm and hit the snooze button or just forgot to set the alarm, but there were some days. So I've told her in recent years, like, I practiced being quiet as fuck on a Sunday. She's like, why? I was like, I did not want to go to church. She's like, well, I meant I wasn't being a good mom. I should have taken you to church more. I'm like, for what? Nothing would have changed. I would have resented all of that stuff because that's what I was doing then. That's what I've done since. And that's what I do now. I'm like, no, do not do this to me, Mom. But anyway, I know how to sneak past her at any moment. She's in my presence. Like, I've got it down. It's a skill. It's a very specific skill, but it's a skill that I have.
Nice. I did not have that problem. My parents barely remembered to take me, but they made up for it by sending me to Catholic school, so I got to fucking go, and they didn't have to. Dicks.
That seems like one of those opportunities. Like, we didn't get to do this, so we're going to let you go. And you're kind of like, well, why are you punishing me with your dream?
Right. And then my dad had like really bad hay fever. So even when, like, he legitimately did. But so even like when we went to church, half the time it was filled with flowers. So like 10 minutes in, dude's like fucking dying and has to go outside. And I'm like, why do we keep coming here? Like, why would you keep doing this to yourself? Like, it wasn't a way to get out of it. It was just literally like, what the fuck are you thinking, man? It did help with jokes at his funeral. I was like, these people brought him flowers. They didn't know him at all, dicks. But anyway.
All right. Well, since we're talking about childhood, I'm gonna ask this question, and I guess I'm gonna start it as a statement, end it with a question. Something I thought was really interesting that they did with this movie, which is a complaint that I have with Stranger Things, Summer of '84, I think was a similar one. Even it, every time, because we have this cyclical thing where every 30 years, or at least at a 30-year period, we jump back. So for the 80s, it was the 50s. For the 90s, it was the 60s. The late 90s, early 2000s, you had a lot of clothing and even some musical sounds that were reminiscent of the 1970s. The 20 we were back in the 80s, and now we're cycled for the 90s now because we're in the 2020s.
People in the 2050s are going to feel so fucking stupid just hanging out in their house for 2 years.
No fooling. Actually, given the way things are, they probably won't believe that this shit ever happened.
That's true. I mean, a lot of people who lived through it,
they won't learn about it. You know what? That's what I mean. Those people are having kids. And sleeping with yoga instructors. So anyway,
I saw the beginning of Idiocracy. I can explain all of this, but continue.
Oh, easily. Well, the with going back and looking at the 80s, the nostalgia kick wasn't there, and I'm glad it wasn't there. And what I mean by as far as my nostalgia kick, I didn't look at him like, oh man, I had a bike like that. Oh man, we had, because when I saw Monster Squad, I could have a little bit of the nostalgia because it's like, oh man, this is like what it was like hanging out with my cousins for the summer. Yeah. This is the type of shit that we did, right? But it wasn't something that was linked to one decade. Where you look at it, look at the Monster Squad, it's kind of like, I love this new Coke. It's rad. Hey, hand me one of those Ecto coolers. That type of shit. So
only if you let me play with your Optimus Prime. Yes.
What's that, Teddy Ruxpin? So it's I look at this film and think to myself, I'm glad they did not go the route of Stranger Things.
Yeah.
And that's nothing against Stranger Things because I like it. But I feel like at a certain point, it's the nostalgia that they have is overdone to the point where you don't know what fucking year it is anymore. Because so much stuff gets mixed together between different years that would not, make sense. Even this past season when they were kind of questioning whether or not Eddie would have been able to memorize all the notes to oh my god, Master of Puppets. Because he only had like 5 days to master it, but he was obviously not playing a guitar while he was hanging out with everybody from school.
He was a prodigy, goddammit.
I know. But maybe they flipped it around because it was an upside down, so it meant he could play. So but my question is that period, as far as when I'm watching these kids in the early part of the movie, well before Finney gets abducted or grabbed, and I immediately thought kind of the same way with Monster Squad, which was, damn, I remember what it was like during my childhood, to where it's, again, as soon as I saw them walking through the chain link or walking down the sidewalks with chain link fences, I was like, holy shit. I felt like everybody's house looked like that let's put up a chain link fence and make this neighborhood look, dog ass ugly. But the idea of you leave your house, as far as us being latchkey kids, you're leaving your house to go to school. And then when you're done, you come home and let yourself back into the home. And for a lot of parents, it was, once you come home, lock the door, stay inside, watch TV, whatever, but do not open the door for anybody, even if it's the police. If this house catches on fire, I better see you here, waiting for me. That type of ridiculous stuff that parents would tell you, which is kind of like, no, get the fuck out of the house. Don't.
My mom always said, just hide in that wooden box over there.
But
I'm glad she doesn't listen to podcasts.
Oh my God. I can't remember if my mom did or not. And it'll be interesting to have to explain some things to her. It's like, what is it you still can't talk to me about? Like, nothing. But the whole idea of that freedom and all that stuff, I've kind of already tipped my hand and said that, this is kind of what I remember. Now, as far as your experience, because we're actually about the same time. We were both in the Midwest. I was just in a different state. What was your experience?
In fairness, the Midwest is like 30 states. So
I know. I was living in Indiana and Colorado around the timeline of this movie.
Yeah, so if you listen to our It episode, I said that wasn't my experience growing up, right? I didn't just ride bikes with my friends all the time and that kind of stuff. We didn't go exploring the sewer or whatever. And I get why people identify with that. But my parents had a business and we traveled all the time. So like every weekend I was like in a different state, pretty much lived in hotels on the weekends. It's why I'm incredibly comfortable at cons and not so much at my house, right? And but the other aspect of that is when I was home, I actually escaped to my cousin's house all the time. He lived like 3 blocks away, but his parents, it felt like they didn't supervise us at all, but they were actually really good at what they did. Like they gave us a lot of space, but they always made sure we were safe, and they were way better at like life lessons than I'll ever be. But like I don't know, like we were like backyard wrestling and crazy fucking shit that the me now goes, how did I ever do that, you know? So I feel like my weird life experience is still very different in that while I did hang out with my friends, we were like playing full contact basketball because we thought we should kill each other if we had the ball. So really, I'm surprised I'm alive, and I don't know if that answers your question at all. But I just don't feel like I did anything that these movies and shows represent. Like that wasn't me.
That's fair. I mean, because again, it's not a universal experience, in many ways. Because I've seen some movies from the '80s, based in the '80s, and of course those that are having the '80s as a backdrop that I look at and I'm like, that shit never happened to me. But it definitely sold me on certain things. Like, I want to go to the mall on a Saturday. Oh, I want to get an icy while I'm there. And then you get older, you go to the mall and you're like, that shit doesn't actually happen.
I was just like, let's go to the mall. And then I just went to like Spencer's and bought stuff. And then I left. Like,
oh, I was the arcade kid until they shut it down.
Nice. We didn't have a good arcade where I was.
We had one.
Well, we did, but not at the mall.
Right.
But yeah. You know, but what I will say is I feel like when I watch something like Stranger Things or any of those, like it feels very like this is the imaginary life that we had in the 80s or whatever decade, anything like that, right? But when I watch something like Black Phone, it feels so gritty and real. Like that's really the world we grew up in instead of the one we pretend to remember. Because I feel like we latch onto these feelings like we were young and we didn't have big problems. So life seems like it was better, even though it was more like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's something that this brings that I wish more stuff did. I wish we got more realistic views of what life was like at the time.
Yeah, as opposed to kind of the exaggerated, romanticized ones, which to quote to quote John Cusack from Hot Tub Time Machine, the 1980s had Reagan and AIDS. Let's get the fuck out of here. So, I mean, like when people always talk about the 80s, they forget that stuff. Like, actually, I take that back. It made a reference to AIDS because they're like, oh, yeah, he was bleeding. And it's like, oh, you don't want to get down there because then you can get AIDS and you can do this. But it at least pulled it, at least with that movie and that line, it pulled in the paranoia that the general public, rightfully so, because you didn't know anything about it. But it pulled in the paranoia that the general public that was far removed from these areas where you had high transmission rates, where all of a sudden, God damn it, we're all going to get AIDS just from breathing around each other. And that's when you just think, God damn, no wonder why the COVID deniers have traction. We had people like that in the 80s and 90s. Now,
absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we covered kind of the alcoholism and mental illness, beating and stuff like that. I guess this is a better way to. What did you like about the representation of the grabber? I mean, especially with the juxtaposition from the. Okay.
Okay, so like I know I've done the whole. This is how the short story is, but let's talk about the greatness of the grabber. If you just gave me a fat bald dude who possibly wants to touch children, like it sounds like in the short story, that guy was in Frailty. I remember him very clearly, and I'm done with that guy. I don't need him. He's real and he bothers me. Okay, let's start with the van alone, man. The van, like when Finney gets out of the house and he's running, and that van peels out of the fucking driveway. Holy shit, that's a great moment. Like I'm totally invested. Like my adrenaline's like, yeah, fucking great, you know? And I don't know, man, even just like when it's just sitting there at the beginning before he drops the groceries, like it's intimidating, but then it's like it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be this magician's like van that says abracadabra on the side, but nothing about it seems legit. Like why he thought, oh, a black van that says abracadabra, that'll get him, you know?
Oh, I'll tell you why. It's all because of Steve Miller. Abracadabra, gonna reach out and grab you.
Whoa.
Now, I don't know if that was intentional, but I was sitting there, I was like, God, that's weird that this is a magician who's making kids disappear, but he has a van that says abracadabra. He's going to reach out and grab you. And I was like, oh shit, that's a Steve Miller song.
Dude, I don't even care if that was the intention. That is headcanon now. That's beautiful.
Look, if somebody involved with this production just confirms it, that's going to be enough for me.
But then you have the masks. And the masks are fucking amazing. The masks are already so iconic. Do I do this? Let me see. All right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go full wrestling fan.
Please do it.
Last night, Bray Wyatt, one of my favorite wrestlers ever, returned to the WWE. And he has a fucking new mask. Because his masks are great. The Fiend mask that he used to have is basically like the Joker when he got his face ripped off. And I mean, everything about it is great. Savini makes the masks. So, you know, they're great.
Mm-hmm.
And last night he returns. He's got a new mask. And it is clearly V for Vendetta meets the Black Phone. There's no way around it. It's so glorious. But that's how iconic this already is. This movie came out, what, a year ago?
No, it came out this year.
Was it
2022? Yeah, 2022.
Jesus. Yeah, I was thinking it came out last October for some reason. I don't know. But anyway, point being, not even a year ago. And it's already so iconic that fucking wrestling is using it. You know, like the look is just phenomenal. But it also, as much as I was just complaining that I want more stuff that's realistic, it adds such a cool level of this isn't just a guy next door. Like this is some really fucked up psycho, right? Like, but it also plays into like the John Wayne Gacy's or these different actual serial killers. And it's just such a cool lore. And then you have Ethan Hawke, who when I heard Ethan Hawke was cast, I had a very similar reaction that I had when I heard Heath Ledger was cast as the Joker. You know, just that's fucking weird. Why? You know, and then holy fuck, everything about his performance is like, this is one of my favorite performances he's done. And I don't know, man, the Grabber is just instantly classic to me. And I love everything about him. What about you?
Awesome. Well, for me, it was, how do I put this? Like, you know, the poster itself. And when it was announced, I kind of had the same reaction. I was like, well, I can't imagine Ethan Hawke as a villain. Not saying that he's never done it, but I mean, as far as like this level of creepy killer, you know, possible child, because the you can't think of child kidnapping without thinking of sexual assault toward children.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because it goes hand in hand, because there's one of those questions of, well, unless you are a child of very wealthy people, and they're kidnapping you, or the kidnappers are taking you to gain some type of ransom. No one is going to attribute that what you've done to sexual assault in any way. They're going to think like, oh, well, you're a rich kid, and I mean, the only rich kid that comes to mind, you know, you're the Obama kids, and somebody kidnaps. Well, shit, they couldn't be that. You're one of Brad Pitt's kids or Angelina Jolie's kids, like that type of thing. You're not a figurehead. You're not, you know, you have your businesses and things, but you get kidnapped. They're not going to make that connection with everyday regular ass people. That connection is right there because we've heard that story so many times. We've heard that story so many times as a warning about who you should be around and who you shouldn't be around. And the problem, this is probably the only problem I have with this movie. The problem is I saw this movie as kind of fitting into that same narrative of the people that are going to be dangerous to you are strangers. They're going to be people that you've never met, people that you're not related to.
Oh yeah.
When all the statistics show that you're more likely to be abducted, assaulted, or murdered by an adult or a family member than you are to ever run into some random psychopath who decides, oh, this kid, he's definitely worth kidnapping. And I think that's the thing that doesn't make his character that scary for me, because it's the whole randomness of him picking at least grabbing kids, and the randomness as far as like there's no thing of he's, I don't know, only kidnapping little blonde girls or little redhead boys or something like that. It's here's a white kid, here's an Hispanic kid, here's another white kid. I think was there another ethnicity? All right, here's an Asian kid. It's random, right? So in making this film, the problem that I have, and I can't think of another one that I would have, but the problem I have is it just reinforces that narrative of stuff like this happens because of people who are strange, you don't know. I mean, this is in the 1980s. This is the height of stranger danger, but it's always going to be people that you don't know. So in a sense, you get more comfortable with people that you're around as far as family and friends who would be the ones to possibly to do that. But then again, I mean, Finney's living in a bad situation. So, I mean, you got that juxtaposition there in the film as far as how his father, which we don't know if his father does anything to him, but we at least see what his father has done to the sister as far as beating her and drinking himself, passing out from drinking.
Yeah, totally. Dude, I keep coming back to Dad, and like, wouldn't it have been kind of interesting if they tried to actually give us like some, is Dad the grabber? Like, I don't know.
You know how we talked about
maybe
it earlier.
Not. Maybe it's just a thing in my head now.
No. You're onto something, because when you're talking earlier about stories are never finished, like you go back and look at stuff. That's the same thing that we're going to do every time we look at any of these things. And whether we're talking about films, television, or even wrestling storylines, we do the same thing where this would have worked better for me. Yeah. This would have been a great way to end it. And I was just telling somebody about watching Black Mirror and said your idea for 15 Million Merits, which was show them at the end that the treadmills, the bikes, they're connected to nothing. So it shows that whatever they're doing is pointless. And I'm like, that would have been such a better ending. I mean, you could still have the one with Daniel Kaluuya where he's sitting there and he's enjoying the fraudulent nature of this whole thing of like, oh, I just need to, I've got this bigger room and I've got money. And all I have to do is show people like, oh, I'm bitching about this, and this. And see me next week. Here's my 5 minutes that I have to do in the week to maintain whatever my status is. But no, just the idea that you threw out there reinforces what you're basically pushing with this movie, which is there is something you could have done better. I mean, not done better. I mean, you could have done differently, because better is always based off of perspective. But okay. I would have loved to have this moment where you kind of question, is the dad doing it? Now, how would you?
Is the dad in on it? Like,
right.
Like you could have like built up. Like I don't want to lose Max. I think Max is a fascinating character, but like you could have like given clues like Dad's hanging out with this dude or something like that too. Like just I don't know, some red herring that would make it more interesting, I guess. But the movie's fine the way it is. I just don't understand Dad's connection, and I think I'm trying to build one.
I mean, there are things that are in that are callbacks, like the being silent, that type of stuff, right?
Yeah.
But I think he serves a purpose. It's just he was showcased too much for the purpose that he serves in this.
Yeah.
And just to me go back to Gwen's abuse, because I don't even want to hear somebody say like she was being she was being beaten. Discipline is being told what you did wrong and what you can do to rectify it. It's for me, this and sexual assault, any type of crime toward a child is, for me, the part of a film that makes me that disturbs me, that bothers me. Right? For some people, for some reason, they feel if you kill the dog in a movie, that means. Let me say something to you people.
Oh boy.
The don't kill the dog in the horror movie people sound just like that character from Community, where it's like, oh, I can draw the line at animal. I'm sorry, I can accept racism, but I draw the line at animal cruelty. Like, you see more fucked up shit in these movies than something that ever happens to a dog. That dog might have been an asshole. That dog might have been like that racist cop's dog. And for those of you who say there's no reason why a dog should be killed, are we going to let Cujo live?
Cujo just wanted to cuddle with people.
I know. But anyway, the kill the dog people, as I'm saying with this whole thing here, yeah, you get that moment where the father, you see the purpose that he's serving, but again, there's too much of that time. Too much time invested in having him on screen to point out that he's an abusive parent or point out that he's a drunk. You could have summed this up subtly, 30 seconds of contact with the dad, and then he's never seen again. Or when you're talking about changing things, let's say the dad does have this moment of, Gwen, where did you dream? He's starting to accept that his daughter can do the dreams and he's not upset about it. It's like, where'd you say you dreamt that Finney was? And he goes over there, and then the grabber actually hits him in the head with the axe as opposed to Max.
Or the cops see him there. That'd be great.
Well, you know what? You brought the cops up, so I'm going to bring up the cops. And I got to say something about the police, the way the police are represented, because I saw some really shitty propaganda this morning where, because this one person was so touched in the community, a homeless person was so touched in the community, they gave $8 to the local police department. I'm like, okay. So what I'm saying is in response to that and the way it's represented in a lot of movies where the cops are investigating, the cops are doing all they can to solve whatever crime this is, right? But for me, I didn't buy it from the first moment. I mean, as far as like them being effective police officers, whether this was supposed to be panned out like these guys are busting their asses trying to find out what's going on. I mean, they were literally in the fucking house at one point. They were in the house of the killer at one point. But what got me was when they originally have this moment to find out what's going on, and they harass, was she an 8-year-old child, 9?
Yeah.
They spend all this energy of like, we know there's a leak in the department. Of like very 1980s cop, by the way. We know there's a leak in the department. You tell us who told you about the address and the suspects and the kids that were taken.
It's so weird.
I'm just sitting here like, okay, first off, the principal or counselor, whoever that is, should have stopped that interaction. 2, parents should have been in the room because you can't talk to kids. I don't care if there's an ongoing investigation or not. You cannot talk to minors without their parents. Even at this point, it was not. It was a bad practice, and it's one of the reasons why you had kids getting convicted for crimes they didn't commit. But no, these cops, I just look at them as how many total kids had been missing at this point? Like 13, 14 kids, something like that. Like it was a lot, and the fact that the guy has the same, like, my thing would have been go to the balloon stores, see who's bought black balloons. Because
damn it, man, you've cracked this case wide open.
Black balloons are hard to come by even today. And there can't be that many party stores in that area of Denver. But no, just the whole like
30 of them. So.
Yeah. just you can send some patrolmen out like, hey, I need you to go to this balloon store, party store, whatever, and ask them who's bought black balloons recently, because it wouldn't just be like, oh, one black balloon or two, and it's or a funeral home. It's obvious, like, okay, well, they're gonna do something with that. But he's ordering lots of balloons.
It was the Goo Goo Dolls.
So anyway, the oh my gosh. Well,
yes.
The thing about Gwen that I think was also a cool added feature, this is something that you'd answered early on before we started recording, and that was, was religion used in the book version, and you were telling me okay, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. Finish what you were saying.
Oh no, I was gonna say, what were your thoughts on it as far as like the way it was used in the movie versus the way it was used in the book, or even how else you would do it?
Well, okay, so it wasn't used in the book. Okay, so the first thing you have to understand is that Gwen is extremely different in the book. She's older than Finney. She's into like the occult and tarot and stuff like that, but she's barely mentioned. Like this is literally like maybe 2 lines out of the short story, right? Mm-hmm. And the only time that we see anything from her point of view is Finney basically having a dream that she's looking for him, and she finds, okay, so the black balloons like went up in the air instead of going into the van with him, okay, and they float away as he's being captured. And then he dreams that she finds the black balloons tied up in like power lines in front of the house where he's being held. And that's it. That's like all that Gwen does. And also, there's no big 2-house thing at the end, which is like the best addition to this story. But anyway, so we don't really see a lot of Gwen. But somebody I know was recently complaining about how it was heavily Christianized by the writers of this version. Mm-hmm. And I get that, but I'm also like, it's not so much that I'm annoyed that they got rid of the occult and the tarot stuff, as much as I just think neither one matters. I don't think she needed this crisis of faith. I don't think she needed to do the whole, are you even real, God? I don't personally feel that it adds that much to her character. I don't feel like it influences how she's looking for Finney. I don't feel like it does anything. So I don't really know why it's in here. So for me, it's more, I think Gwen's whole side story of looking for him is super cool. I think it's a great addition. I love the whole, I think you could have just left it at the, I'm going to say Stephen King-esque, even though it's George Hill. George Hill? Really? I'm not even going to edit that out because I deserve to be beaten for that.
Well, I mean, George Hill is an NBA champion.
That's true. Good for him. But no, so it's this very Stephen King-esque Joe Hill thing going on with like the dreams and seeing the address and all that stuff. And I think that's so cool that I don't think you needed this other aspect of her character at all. I don't think it matters. So it just kind of annoyed me more than anything. It doesn't do anything. Like, she doesn't pray and then find him. She doesn't solve her crisis of faith anywhere. I don't understand why it's in there. It's just very distracting to me.
Well, I just love the whole Jesus, what the fuck?
Oh, man. I read online, somebody was like, oh, you might be bothered when she prays this way. And I was like, that's the only way I've ever prayed, man. I'm like, listen up, motherfucker. You need to fix this,
Look, I know I've said Jesus, what the fuck, more than my share of times.
Right? Yeah.
But it brought a smile to my face where I was like, it'd be just the idea that this is, I think adding her, not saying that you're not saying this, but I think adding her was a cool extra feature. I mean, minus some of the things that they could have like left out and not done for her, or done to her.
No, she's great.
But because it shows siblings in a positive way and not in a weird way where it's like, hey, bro, no sister calls their brother bro unless it's for specific things like to mess with them. and no guy is calling his sister, "Hey, sis." You're calling her by her name or a nickname that you've given her. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So seeing a healthy relationship, even the part with the fight where she jumps in and then she gets hit by one of the boys, and then she's like sitting right next to the kid whose head is cracked open. But showing how there is this positive relationship where Finney feels like it's his job to take care of her and look after her, because he knows his dad is incapable of doing it or unwilling to do it at this moment.
Yeah.
And then you also have the healthy, I know we'll probably get some reaction for this one, the healthy relationship that the Grabber and Max have, which Max, he's visiting his brother, like even when he's doing cocaine off of his table and he lets the cops in. They seem to have this, at least a good relationship where it's kind of like, we're just hanging out and don't worry about me going to the house across the street where I probably keep all these kids. Oh, don't worry about this rug where I'm burying all these kids. Don't worry about this rug I'm taking out of the basement.
Oh, everything's fine.
Are those size 7 shoes? No. But even the idea of Grabber says, like, look, I don't want to kill him. Okay, basically don't make me do this.
Yeah.
And when this moment finally happens where Max figures out, oh shit, it's the house I'm in where these kids are being kept. He goes to save him, and we see how the Grabber's a little bit remorseful about having to kill his brother, but it's almost kind of matter of fact, like, oh, yeah, he was my brother. He was an idiot, but he was my idiot. Understanding like, yeah, it's always gonna be me before you, but I am gonna feel bad about this. Which I have a brother that I don't communicate well with, or at all. But when I recently heard about something, or at least someone threatening him, my first thought was similar to this one, which is he's an asshole, but he's my asshole. And my thing is, you don't get to do anything to him. If anybody gets to kick his ass, it's going to be me. No one else. There's a monopoly on this. And the idea that, this film was able to play around with those relationships of siblings and what could have worked, what couldn't have worked. And even again, after the Grabber kills his brother, he defends him like, oh, he's really a good guy. Now let me grab this axe and pull it right out of his head in front of you.
I hadn't really considered the difference in siblings, and that's kind of fascinating because it is just like built in. It's this one thing that they have in common.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's been protecting his sibling this whole time from the truth,
right?
And she's trying to protect her sibling, and man, that's kind of great. I do want to go back to Gwen for 1 second here because I love how even if she had succeeded, she wouldn't have saved Finney. She just led them to the house with the bodies. And maybe that, helps, but it doesn't accomplish what she needed. And I love that this whole movie is about Finney having to stand up for himself,
yes.
And but this is such great writing, as much as I've shit on a couple of their things. This part is great writing because everything is giving us hope that he'll be saved, but there's no hope coming. There's right. No one coming to save him. Even the people that are coming to save him will not get there. They get somewhere, but they don't get to the right place, even though they're right there. And man, that's just masterful. I love it. And the kick that you feel when you find out they're at the wrong house is just so good. I love it.
Well, not only that,
it's very Saw, so I adore it. But yeah.
Not only that, I was actually thinking, oh shit, what's the timeline? So, because if you've ever done like sleep deprivation or isolation, you lose all sense of time. So just from him being in there, we could have said he was in there for a day or 2 days because you're not you shouldn't think he's going to be in there for a while, which it's clear he's there for a few days or at least a little while. It seems as though Bruce, Robin, I'm not sure if there's anybody between Bruce and Robin. They couldn't have been there that long. You know, as far as in that house to be kidnapped, but then also to be in that house and go through all that, right? Because it seems even with Robin's character, he got nabbed or grabbed on a Saturday, and Finney gets taken. It seems like it's a Tuesday.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it doesn't seem. So I'm thinking, oh my God, they're doing some Christopher Nolan shit where you're going to find out this is, Finney's buried here with everybody else, and the grabber had taken all of his shit out of the house and relocated. Because even when you get that upstairs kind of scene, you don't see that much of the upstairs. So it's very believable that it is the right house. It's just this is maybe a week later that Gwen is able to figure out what house it is. But I mean, that was a great trick, because I was still convinced up until that point that Finney walks out of the house that they're on different timelines. I was still stuck on that because they do it so well.
So really fast, you said Bruce and you said somebody else, and I know you want to do it. And you said Christopher Nolan, and I know you want to do it.
All right.
But you should know that I'm setting you up for a punchline afterwards.
I know you are. I will have to say this. I am surprised that they played around with that and then also had two characters named Bruce and Robin. So in theory, Finney was saved by the bat phone because he was able to talk to Bruce and Robin. Not to mention, the villain looked like the Joker.
I love it. You ready for this? This is going to be insane. This is such a stretch. In the short story, he's John Finney. And in the movie, he's Finney Blake. And John Blake, whose middle name is Robin.
God damn it.
Boom. Boom. Dark Knight Rises, baby.
All right. So here's one thing. Since I just mentioned the phone, I did forget something I wanted to point out.
Yeah.
So Finney goes through this training montage. Well, I shouldn't call it a training montage. He goes through training with Robin, right, in the afterlife. And I love how he's just like, oh, well, you need to fight. Because all the other advice or at least the suggestions everybody else is giving him are just the pieces to finally get to come together so he can have his moment, right? Yeah, his moment to stand up for himself. Because early on, I'm like, how the fuck is he going to get out of here without going through the front door?
Absolutely.
And it's clear, like, he's going to have to go up those stairs. There's no, he can't go through the refrigerator. He can't go through the window. He can't even, I think at one point he was digging the hole, but, you're not going to be able to dig out. You can't even make a phone call out because the phone doesn't work. But anyway, he's doing this training where, Robin is telling him, like, hey, you need to throw a punch. You've got a great arm, and take the phone, fill it up with dirt and rocks. And so it gets heavy, and then you just, practice with it. Right. And he does something that's, again, it's something that's very remarkable for the thought process of a child at that time. And he goes to, basically just take the handle with him, as opposed to he's going to wait by the phone for the grabber to approach him and then hit him in the face. But when he cuts the line, I just looked at him like, man, he's sacrificing the phone. And so I was telling you this, and I will say this, half joking, half serious. You could also see that the phone itself takes over the life or the experience of two movie tropes. That is one, that is the sacrificial Negro, mm-hmm. and it is the magical Negro. I would even go so far as to say that it's the token black, because we watched the movie and it was like the cop and the principal. There were no black kids. But anyway, You put a ginger kid in there and took away the black ones. This is like reverse Little Mermaid. So,
oh my God.
Because he uses the phone to get out of that situation when normally we would see the phone as a device to communicate with somebody in order to inform them about your situation. He physically uses that and the cord to get away from the grabber. And the one thing that didn't necessarily take me out of the movie, but took me out of the time period as far as the time period I'm in, as well as the time period that I was watching as I was flipping back and forth thinking about it. And that is, there's no fucking way you'd be able to kill somebody like that post 2010 or 2015. Because I don't know, other than the handful of people in a certain age group, I don't know of anyone who has a home phone or even to consider that they would have a home phone that has a cord or a long cord, twirly cord, I can't remember what it's called, but twirly cord that has the phone posted on the wall that you have to, mount on the phone line that's on the wall so you can have a phone. Because I remember those days, the conversations as far as like your conversation went as long as the cord did. But again, I don't know how
stuff out of here. I got to watch TV over here.
Yeah. But again, I don't know how, when we talk about adaptations and things like that, I don't know how you would be able to adapt that kill scene in a similar way for something of today, where you're choking somebody with a phone cord. Maybe you choke them with
I don't think it works any other way.
The USB charger. I mean, that would be the only thing I can think of.
Then they just unplug the one side, That would actually be really funny. Somebody write that into something.
And you're fighting to plug it back in, and you keep getting it on the wrong side, no matter which side you do it on.
I tried that side 3 times, and now it works.
All right, if you were in this situation, don't even say it.
I would be dead.
I know. I just said don't say it. All right, if this were your situation, what would be your breaking point? Because, and I say this because I didn't notice it until the second time, or I should say I didn't pay attention to it until the second time around. Finney doesn't cry until near the end. So what would be your breaking point as far as time or situation?
I mean, his breaking point is fantastic after everything that he does to get to that point, and then he still feels like there's no hope. It's great. I would have literally, I am a big fucking wuss, dude. Like, the part where he grabs me and throws me in the van, probably right there. Definitely when I hit the little jail cell basement, like I'm fucked if I'm in this situation. So I don't know. I think I would come back from it. Like, I think I would have, if I was alive long enough, I would get to a point where then I could start fighting. You know what I mean? But no, I would have fucking lost it right away.
That's a respectable answer, because that's kind of what I expect. That first day, you're like, fuck, what is one, the disbelief, the anger, the idea that you're not going to see your family again, and wondering about how much time you have. Like, the only thing I would compare that to is for whenever you go off to basic training, because you're like, oh, this will be fuck. The first time somebody yells at you, you're like, God damn it, what did I do? What stupid decision did I make in my life?
Even like the other aspect of this is he knows people don't come back from this.
Right.
Like, I mean, it's drilled in everybody. Like, Robin's the guy teaching him to be stronger in his daily life. Robin's the one protecting him from these bullies. And that guy couldn't put up a fight.
And he even points it out. He's like, I'm not you. You did.
Yeah. But Bruce, same thing. Like, yeah, Finney's a great pitcher, but like, look at Bruce. Like, older girls are into him. Like, there's that part where he's riding his bike and the girls are checking him out. And like, Finney doesn't physically compare to Bruce. Like, so. And Vance, like, this kid's fucking psychotic, man. He like stabs somebody over pinball or some shit. I don't remember.
They carved numbers in his name.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, like these are the people that failed, you know? So like, no, if I had all that information, I'm done. Like I've fucking lost it at that point.
So. What I think this film could also be used as a cautionary tale, in the sense of things like the Brer Rabbit stories or Gullah Tales or Grimm's fairy tales, where you understand, or Aesop's fables for that matter, where you have something that is distinctive that can be learned. And not to compare this to a previous episode, but in Monster Squad, let me go back a little bit further. I have a friend who, when she watches movies, she says she gets annoyed watching them with her partner because her partner will say something to the effect of, I don't feel as though I learned anything. And you know, this was after the Gray or whatever that Liam Neeson movie was where he was fighting wolves. She said they watched it and her response was, I liked it, but I don't feel like I learned anything from it. Like, you know, there wasn't anything I could use. I'm not going to, okay, I could use broken up bottles to fight wolves out, you know, out in the Arctic, right?
One does.
But I say that to bring in a previous episode, which is Monster Squad, where I joked about it in a couple other movies where I'm like, the plot is like razor thin. You know, there's not that much, there's not that depth there, right? As far as the story and what's going on, it's really, oh, here's this crazy amulet that Dracula wants. We better stop him. Whereas this one, you feel as though there is some type of moral, or actually several morals to tell. But you also have this moment where you can look at it and say, you have the ability to do things. Don't compare yourself to everyone else, where there's Robin who's tougher. There's Bruce who's, I guess, a little bit more physically gifted. And then Vance, who is a very violent person. You know, you got all these aspects of, you could even say like toxic male traits. You've got all these aspects that won't save them. So all the people who listen to like the Andrew Tate or go to the Hustlers University and stuff like that, they can quickly understand from this movie, it's not the biggest guy, it's not the strongest guy, it's not the meanest guy. Like, it just happens to be the person who's looking at this in a different perspective and trying to figure things out. Because it was clear that none of the other ones had done that shit, as far as like taking the grate out of the window or really getting behind the refrigerator, the wall with the refrigerator, or trying to dig it. Like, it was clear that it seems as though in his head, Finney is seeing these are the ways that these guys would have done this, or this is what they would have attempted. This is how they would have tried it. And then that break, or at least that when he breaks, that for me, that's almost the thing of, I tried all these things I know other people would have done, but I don't know what I need to do. Because he strikes me as somebody who, as Robin will even say, like, you need to stand up for yourself. I think he's one of those people who has trouble defining who he is. And as a result, that's why, one, he can't stand up for himself. He doesn't stand up for himself with the bullies. He doesn't stand up for himself like with his dad when he's beating his sister. And he's insecure when, you know, the girl wants to, which all of us would be at that age, but he's insecure when it comes to having her as a lab partner, that shyness, right? But at the end,
she's clearly interested.
Yeah. He's found his identity by the end. He's defined himself. He stood up for himself. And you even see a great change in his demeanor. And it's not just the whole thing of like, oh my God, that kid's the guy who killed the grabber. They're looking at him in a different way with that, and also the way in which he's carrying himself. Because at no moment in that last like minute of the movie where he's walking through the school and going to class and all this stuff, does he put his head down. Contrast with earlier in the film, there's not a moment that he picks his head up except to look for danger. So, I mean, I love how you see two different Finneys.
Yeah. No, his change is beautifully done. I will say, I thought it was fucked up he had to go back to school right away.
It was the 80s. They weren't offering therapy back then.
I was like, give this kid some time. Jesus. But also, I love, you know, there's so many times that when they do a scene like this, when he's walking down the hall and everyone's talking about him, when they do scenes like this, they go outlandish, you know, they're like, oh, I heard he ate 3 dragons and shit out their hearts or some crap. And I loved that everybody had pieces of the information, but not the whole story. I thought that was such a great, like that's how we consume news. That was so beautiful to me. I was just like, man, I like that so much better than, I don't know, the Mean Girls way. I love Mean Girls. I'm not picking on Mean Girls, but like the Mean Girls way would be to go extravagantly outlandish, you know, and God, I thought this was so good. I was like, wow. I was probably more impressed with that than the end of the movie itself, but
well, I mean, you bring up a good point as far as the consumption of stories, rumors, whatever, right? Because they could have gone that route, and it's very telling that the way they do this, as well as the way that the television series True Blood did it in one of their finales, which was people are going to accept a lie, accept a mirage, or an illusion. I'm sorry. They're willing to accept that if it makes them comfortable. Whereas if something is truthful and it's not comfortable for them, it, you know, as far as it gives them some discomfort as far as their worldview or even their background, then they can't accept that no matter what. So in this film, yeah, you get those pieces. So you love how everybody is getting their information, which they can't even trace where the information is coming from, which I thought was another cool little 80s touch, or I should say childhood touch, where it's kind of like, yeah, did you ever hear that one guy ate Pop Rocks and drank Pepsi and died because his stomach exploded? Yeah. Right? Or for parents, it was somebody put razor blades in the Halloween candy. We can't send you out to trick or treat because we heard that somebody did that. I'm like, well, who is it, Mom? I don't know, but it was somebody. So we're checking your candy when you come home. I'm like, all right, cool. But and again, that makes you understand Fox News at this point.
Nothing makes me understand. Anyway, yeah. Did we miss anything? I don't even know, man.
No. I was going to say,
so good.
The other thing that, it was kind of about the neighborhood, right? Because there are a couple of moments where I feel as though, because there was so little supervision in comparison, there was so little supervision in the 1980s, because everybody figured if somebody was home, they were going to see kids like doing shit. So it was never a thing of we were not going to be able to find out what happened, because there are definitely women on the and men on the street out here that are working the night shift. They're up during the day, or they're just stay at home parents. And Mr. Johnson knows to call me if you do some shit. And I want you to know that Mr. Johnson has permission to, which was another weird thing in the 80s, well, even before the 80s. Mr. Johnson has permission to beat your ass if he catches you doing something, which, again, I thought was a very weird situation. I think hitting kids is weird. And I think allowing schools to hit kids, which is still legal in many states, I think that's really backwards. But if you believe that beating kids is okay, what I will say is argue with your mama, not me. So that's just a phrase I've co-opted lately. Argue with your mama, don't argue with me. All right, so I guess that would bring it to an end. But of course, we got our movie recommendations, and I know James is going to say about how many million movies I have listed, but I don't. It's only
7,411.
No, it's in double digits with a couple of commas. So if somebody liked this movie, because you like to do the double features, if somebody liked this movie, what is another movie you would have as a double feature to lead into this one or follow it, or just something that you think would be similar to it that people would like?
So this is my second favorite movie I saw this year. When I finished it, I've avoided it. I finally watched it yesterday. Okay. Mm-hmm. And it was because I liked the short story so much, and I got to the point where I had so much hype going into it that there was no way it could live up to no matter what it did, right? And then it blew me the fuck out of the water. It was just great. But yeah, so I immediately after I was like, this is either my favorite movie I saw or my second favorite. I'm not sure which. And I think the couple little scenes that I talked about are what knocks it down for me. And oddly, my favorite film I saw this year was Fresh. And, go back and listen to our Fresh episode because that movie's just fucking great. But yeah, Fresh is my double feature as well. There's kidnapping, there's fighting back. These two have so many similar things that I'm like, is this just some weird like road that I'm on right now that this is what appeals to me? I don't know. But yeah, so Fresh, that's my double feature. I think Fresh and Black Phone together would be weirdly enjoyable. Like they're just so different and yet so similar. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess I should. Let me mark off. Actually, I did not have Fresh on mine. So I will go with a movie that's very similar to this one. That features, you got a pretty good lineup. You've got Wolverine and not Mephisto, the other guy. Prisoners. That has Hugh Jackman. Oh my gosh, Jake Gyllenhaal. I think Viola Davis is in it. Creep and Creep 2. What Lies Beneath with Michelle Pfeiffer and
I hear she's got a great neck.
And Harrison Ford. Jesus, don't start that again. Gemma will never. All right. Speaking of necks, the next movie is The Visit. Candyman, but the new version, the reboot. Summer of '84. And James, I'm surprised this was not a double feature or a movie marathon. Saw.
Oh yeah, this totally goes with Saw. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Another great one, which we need to cover one day, is Hush, Ouija, either Ouija or The Origin. And I forgot the name of the Cloverfield movie where John Goodman's keeping the woman in the basement. But that version of the Cloverfield trilogy, the second movie. The Ritual, which is another great film on Netflix.
It's 10 Cloverfield Lane, right?
10 Cloverfield Lane. Okay. The Boy, Skeleton Key, His House, Ready or Not, Open House, which doesn't necessarily have a good end. I mean, it doesn't have a happy ending. It Follows, Ma, and another one that I'm surprised that you did not mention before we started talking. Host.
I love Host.
I would throw Host in here as well.
That'd be fun together. Except in Host, they don't realize they've been kidnapped by one of them.
Right. And they also can't use a corded phone to strangle the demon.
Cool.
All right, James. Well, where can people follow you, sir?
Oh boy. Well, Twitter's probably the best. I'm just at James Sabata. Very easy to find. It's all like dad jokes and like anger at politics. A lot of turning Kirsten Cinema's name into Kirsten's Enema. And let's see, what else do I do there? I don't know. Occasionally I push other people's books. Yeah, so Twitter's the best place. My Instagram like never gets used, so you can follow me there, but the odds that I'll even follow you back, I mean, that's like 3 months out till I check it again. And then Facebook is just like me whining all the time, so I wouldn't add me there. Yeah, so let's just say Twitter. What about you?
Well, I'll give you my information, but I just want to let everybody know we have a special guest on the next episode. It's going to be Kirsten Enema. She apparently paid me a lot of cash, so I have to do that because that's what she does in office. Anyway.
That's weird. I thought it worked the other way around. I thought we had to give her a lot of cash.
Well, she misread the email. So anyway. My area, I mean, you very much follow me anywhere. Twitter, it's Don Guillory or at Don Guillory. Facebook, just, well, there are a bunch of us. I will just say Instagram and TikTok. Because I typed my name in one time and I was like the 15th result. I'm like, how is that possible? TikTok and Instagram, I really don't care. I keep it up more for like wrestling updates, which is weird. And every now and then something I'm working on. So if I don't respond or follow back, just give me about a week or so. But the TikTok and Twitter are both Token Black Guide, same name as my first work. So hopefully you got that one and you know how to spell it.
Excellent. Yeah, I guess that wraps it up for another week. So as always, I am James Sabata.
And I am Don Guillory.
And we'll see you back here at thenecronama.com.